Thank you very much, Kate, and congratulations on your first day on the job as chair of the Manchester Library. And Linda McKeever's last day yesterday, after 5 years of serving as the chair of the Manchester Library. You're going to have to stand and hold this thing. So Linda, please stand up so we can all congratulate and thank you. A storekeeper all my life. That's what I've been, starting as a little kid. I'm going to take you on a journey today of the genesis of the Vermont Country Store, the Orton family, the Wilcox family, how it all came together and came to be. North Calais, Vermont. Probably most of you have never been there, but if you can find Burlington on the left and Montpelier right below, you get an idea of where it is. Still on the dirt roads up there. And North Calais, Vermont was where everything started. Here's a photograph from around 1890 showing the number 10 pond in North Calais. And its meeting house out there on the peninsula was built about 20 years before that and served as a meeting house until about 4 or 5 years ago. So now they're renovating it. So if anybody is into supporting historic renovation, they can use some help on the meeting house. Beautiful place where they have weddings and all sorts of community events. Anyway, back to 1873, I think that's the date, on number 10 pond, and a Sunday after church when everybody was dressed in their Sunday church finest, and in that era it was probably black and heavy and long and big and whatnot, and a whole gang of people took 3 rowboats across the pond to have a picnic, and did so. And on the way back they cast off, and all of a sudden one of the boats started to take on water, and another one, and everybody got panicked, and a whole bunch of people fell in, and 5 people drowned in this little town of North Calais. It was a huge catastrophe, and 4 of them were my ancestors. And at the last minute, in other words, they were fishing people out, trying to save people and get them to hang on to the boats. They got Alice Teachout pulled out of the water. She survived. She was 7 months pregnant with Lilia, her daughter, who became my grandmother when she married my grandfather. So we were sort of, that's one of those moments in time when, but for her getting fished out of the water, I guess I wouldn't be standing here today talking about the history of the Vermont Country Store. So, and I think the next day the minister chided them for bad behavior for allowing that to happen. This is back in those days. And here's a quick picture of Lilia and her parents, Alice and Melvin Teachout. But let's go back here to Lyman Squire Orton, born in 1837, lived in Walden, Vermont, obviously the ancestor whom I was named after. And Lyman had 5 sons. And on the right there, you'll see Gardner Lyman Orton, my grandfather. And Gardner Lyman Orton married Lilia Teachout, the in-the-womb rescued from drowning. And Melvin and my grandfather went into business together with the Teachout Orton store in North Calais. And they're standing in the picture, you can't see them there, and the sign says Teachout Orton. And that store started in North Calais in 1897. And that happened to be the year that my father was born in neighboring Hardwick, Vermont. This is a picture back in those days. And my father was the oldest of 4 sons, one of them Lyman in the upper left, Paul, who came to Weston and ended up running the Weston Bowl Mill for many years with Sam Lloyd, if any of you remember that era, and Carlton, who became a doctor up in Waterbury, and who's my cousin Sydney, who still lives up there. And my father used to tell me this story about having a dog that pulled a wagon. And I found this picture of my father standing by the dog and Lyman and Paul sitting in the wagon. And the big joke was the dog was named Guess. What's your dog's name? Guess. You know, in a small town, there's not much to laugh at, so you gotta have something. So, next time you get a dog, think about it. That's a good name. It's a big dog. After 10 or 12 years, my grandfather got an opportunity with two gentlemen in Athol, Massachusetts, which is in central Massachusetts, and Mr. Goodnow and Mr. Pearson to come down there and go into business to open a department store in Athol, which they did. The whole family moved to Athol, Mass, and there's the building with the Goodnow Pearson Orton store. The building's still there, although it hasn't had that store there for a long time. But my father went to high school there in Athol, and while he was in high school, started writing and putting out a weekly flyer for the store. So he had this talent to be able to do that sort of thing. And he got interested in printing because the local print shop would print it up, so he would go over there and they were teaching him how to use presses and become a printer way back then. We go along and they grow up. My dad's over there on the right with the other brothers in Athol. And then he went to Harvard for about a year, and like so many other young men of that era, joined up for World War I, got a gig as an ambulance driver, which in France, which is a hell of a lot better than being down in the trenches, I imagine, but I don't know how good it was. My father always had this knack for getting photos taken. I mean, what the hell is he doing there? He's got a tank helmet on, standing next to a tank, but he's got suit pants and polished shoes on, so he wasn't ready to drive the tank. But it's a good picture. And so he came back from World War I and went to New York and got a job at the American Mercury, founded by H.L. Mencken and George Nathan. And it was one of the most famous literary magazines up to that point that had come out. It ended up with a circulation of like 88,000 people for a magazine with no photographs and all write-ins. So he learned an awful lot from Mencken, and who was a very famous critic back in the 20s with an acerbic tongue who took on everybody. And then got a job at Time magazine, worked with Henry Luce for a while, and then he got homesick. So he decided to come back to Weston, to his home of Vermont. He'd found Weston. He hadn't grown up there, but he'd found it on some trips and decided to come back. Meanwhile, down on the Wilcox farm, 5 miles south of town here, Wilcox ice cream, yes. There's a family painting of the farm back then. My mother, Mildred Ellen Wilcox, and her mother, Mariah Hamilton, in this picture here. My mother went to Burton, graduated in 1928 from Burton. Here she is. Many of you probably knew Roger and Howard, her two brothers, and Mildred, swimming in the little creek that went through the farm down there. As kids, we'd get in there and you know, everybody's worried now about the cows too close to the water. The cows are right next to the water, and we were in the water. And, but I must have been immunity built up or something like that. Maybe that's the way to do it. Anyway, my mother lived to be 99, so it seemed to work for her. Then she goes off to Rutland, lived with an aunt who lived there, so she could attend Rutland Business College. I call Rutland Business College the Catherine Gibbs of Vermont. And Catherine Gibbs is a really, really good place. You know, you used to think of it as secretarial, but boy, you learned mostly, I think all women, maybe men now, I don't know, but they learned a lot. And she went to Rutland Business College for 2 years, and I found the diploma, because they kept everything. They lived in the brick house in Weston from the 1936 when they were married until 2010 when my mother died at 99, and nothing got thrown away. So an attic full of treasure. So there's the diploma, and come early spring of 1930, the head of the Rutland Business College came to my mother and said that Charles Tuttle, the founder and owner of Tuttle Publishing Company, and there's still a Tuttle building on Center Street in Rutland, and now Tuttle Publishing is down actually in the Airport Industrial Park, right near where our warehouse is. And anyway, he said, Charles wants a secretary and wants the best girl we have, so we're going to send you. And she said, I haven't graduated yet. He said, don't worry, Mildred, you've learned all you're going to learn here. Go take the job. It's a good idea. And come back for graduation. And she did. And there she is at the desk at Tuttle Publishing Company. My father had also gone to work at Tuttle, doing imprint books, finding things for them to publish under Tuttle's name, but also other names. And here he is at the same desk. So this is where my father and mother met. He'd be in and out and so on. And years later, I'd quiz my mother, well, what was it like? How was the courtship? I don't talk about that. Okay. But you know how it goes, you know. So, I mean, it's really not good to share personal things in a family. It's really not. It's not good. And so here we are. Here's a Harry Schockler painting of Peru, Vermont. And right in the middle, the Bromley House, some of you probably remember, but it burned down back in the 60s, but it was a hotel right there. And on the right side is the market that then was replaced by today's Hapgood store, JJ, and across the street, the church. And that's where my parents were married. And I asked my mother, after, this was years later, I was probably in my 50s, so I got enough courage to start asking her personal questions. I said, well, why did you get married in Peru? Because the Wilcoxes all attended either the Union Church in Sunderland or the Congregational Church in the village. How come up there? Well, you know, your father was divorced. Oh my God. Divorced man. And I guess the family was a little twisted around about that. I never really did find out if I guess they came to the wedding, but you know, I couldn't get any more out of her about that. But there was this stuff about my dad being divorced. You know, here it is, 1936. So they got married. There's the wedding picture. The only picture I have of my father grinning. Look at that necktie from that, you know, the short, fat neckties, you know. And his hand on his shoulder, my mom, and that's the front door of the brick house on the village green in Weston. And there's a picture of it, the Orton house, around 1939. And my father started something called the Countryman's Press. By then he accumulated some printing presses of the sort of 1890 vintage that went like this and put stuff in and by hand, and was published a few broadsides and some books. He did a book called And So Goes Vermont, which was probably the only photographic journal book of touring around Vermont, black and white photographs and so on. And he closed that because of World War II. Years later, by the way, there is a Countryman's Press now, and the people who started that, oh, I don't know, 40 years ago, called up and wanted to know if they loved the name. And he said, sure, have at it. I don't care. Go ahead and take the name. So it lives on, but different people, different business, but still publishing. And there's my dad in the press, working at the press. Now you notice he's, I think he's got on some Johnson woolen pants, heavy wool, because everything was cold, and a woolen jacket. But you notice the deerskin patches on the sleeves? They didn't put those on at the factory when they made those jackets, right? They got sewed on after the elbows wore out. And so for years, when they first started coming out with these patches on jackets you could buy at the stores, and the older people go, put those on until it wears out. It's just phony. There's my mom and dad in the house in Weston. Had 5 fireplaces in the house, and they're huddled up in front. That's where I grew up. And comes September 1841, I'm born, and I'm born in Burlington. Well, I was born in Burlington because my father had gotten a job working for the Mary Fletcher Hospital, which became, of course, the whole medical center up there. And they wanted him to do a history up to that point of it. And he wrote a book, went up there and spent almost a year researching, wrote a book called Mary Fletcher Comes Home. He got an apartment, and that's where they were living when and I was born there. And I think it was probably I got born free because he was working there and got a deal, because my brother was also, they took him up there to get, my mother up there to get born. So it must have been some deal where, you know, you get paid. I don't think he got paid much for the book, but he got 2 free kids out of it. So anyway, of course, Pearl Harbor looms. September 7th, December 7th, the same year, and the war breaks out. And so my father gets a job first in Philadelphia in the Ordnance Department for the war, and then in the Pentagon. And he got a job as a speechwriter and publicist for some generals there. And so we lived during the war years in Georgetown, and there's my little brother Jeremy with my mom in Georgetown. And toward the end of the war, and here comes the idea. My dad's looking through a magazine, and this lithograph was used in an ad for Chase and Sanborn Coffee, a brand that's no longer around, but that was very famous back then. And it reminded him naturally of the store in North Calais of his father and father-in-law. And he's got the idea to come back to Weston. He had the printing presses, he knew how to write, and to put out a catalog, I think with the idea that maybe I can finally start making money writing, because he was a writer, wrote all the time, loved writing, but you know, not every writer makes much money. So it turned out that that was a pretty damn good idea. So they come back to Weston, and in the fall of 1945, puts together a catalog, gets a few products together, 36 items you can buy now. Not someday, now. You know, it's almost said, send in your order today or offer expires, you know how that used to go. But anyway, so it's a little catalog that he printed on the presses there, sent out to the Christmas card list and some other lists that they got their hands on. The Vermont Country Store, Vermont Orton, prop. And got to get orders in. And they fill the orders out in the garage, but also got letters. Oh, we're coming up next summer and see the store. Didn't have a store yet. Oh, crap. What? Well, turns out, the lower left here, that building was for sale, and they bought it. It was a rooming house at that point. And look in the upper right, the store in North Calais, so almost identical buildings. And he saw that and said, oh, that's good, let's buy that, and it was for sale. So they did. And by summer, opening day, 1946, the Vermont Country Store, the wooden store. I always say we have 3 stores. We have wooden stores, we have paper stores, our catalog, and we have digital store, the internet. So the wooden store opens in 1946. In the meantime, I don't know how my father had time to do this. He and Earl Newton and Walter Hard from here in Manchester, got together and went to see Governor Gibson and said, we need a Vermont state magazine to drum up business for Vermont and get people to move here and all that sort of thing. So he said, okay, and how are we going to do that? And they said, oh, we can do it. So they did. My mother used to say they would be sitting at the dining room table with scissors and cutting stuff out and so on, trying to get this thing together. And that started in 1946 too. And then this cute thing comes out in 1947. You know, the foliage thing. You've got the leaves, and the model is there with a palette of paint, and she's got a paintbrush, and she's painting the leaves. Very, very charming thing. Except she's wearing this diaphanous nightgown in 1947. The governor's phone starts ringing off the frickin' hook. It's, you boys get your asses up here pronto, and they got dragged onto the carpet, and I don't know if they were drinking Jack Daniels. I know they were smoking Vermont Country Store pipe tobacco, but that didn't have that effect on them. But whatever it was, they thought this would be a cute idea, and I think that was the first and last sort of brush with that level of so if you're going to collect a Vermont Life magazine, that's a hell of a good one to collect. And they almost lost their jobs, and Vermont Life almost ended on the spot over that. So here we are back in the store. My father's always looking for, you know, how to publicize things. Got the Vermont State Checkers Championship held in the store. And here's the checker players and my little brother Jeremy in the middle watching them. You notice these guys are all in suits and everything, you know, playing checkers. So they held it there, and that got written up, got mentioned in Life magazine. It was, you know, such a cool thing. Then the catalog business is going along in the back room, typing up orders, you know, sending out more catalogs. The wagon you see right in front there is pulled by a man. They'd pack the packages, fill that two-wheeled wagon up. It's got kind of a old lawnmower handle there. Drag it 2 doors down to the Weston post office, unload it at the post office in the back door, drag it back to the store, and that was the first delivery. It's almost like Orton's UPS coming out of the back door and over to the post office. And so in just a couple years, the post office set up a substation over there because we were getting more packages. And apparently, I don't really remember much about it. My dad brought the wagon over so my brother and I could play with it, and I assume we trashed it because it disappeared, and I would just give my eye teeth to have that thing back, you know. What an artifact to have. My folks were not sports people. They didn't talk about sports, they didn't do sports, but they did a little skiing. This was 1940 in the Weston rope tow, and it says to Mother and Dad from Vrest, March 1940, to his parents, and my mother's standing there sort of frozen. I'm not sure she ever went up the lift, but you know, they had skis. I still have my father's skis that, you know, have the Dartmouth Co-op label on them, you know, because they didn't get used too much. But we did go out. There's the little shack there, the Model A engine for the rope tow, which was great. It's right across the street from our house, so you could ski over there. And there we are, get the skis. Look at the length of those skis my mother has. My brother and I getting ready to trudge over to the rope tow and have a ski for the day. So it was a wonderful life growing up in this little town of Weston with a rope tow across the street you could ski to, and the village green right there. We lived right on the village green. And, you know, my mother took care of all the books, was the bookkeeper for the Vermont Country Store. Thank God she was a bookkeeper, because otherwise my father would have spent all his money on cars. But she took care of the books. And Sam Waite, we see here, was the head clerk, an old family in Weston. He is the uncle of Bobby and John Waite, who many of you know, realtors, been around for a long, long time. And Sam was a wonderful guy. I was young then. I wouldn't call him my mentor, but he saw to it that I learned storekeeping. Start with how do you sweep the floor, because we had sawdust that was laced with kerosene that you threw on the floor and then swept it up, keep the dust down. And you know, I don't think they inspected things from the state back then to see, you know, is this, what's the fire marshal got to say about this? What's the health department got to say about this? Oh, I don't know, I survived. And, but so, and you don't do this with a broom, you pull it and so on. And how do you open a barrel of pickles that we would get every year for Memorial Day weekend, sent out from Rochester, New York, which was the cucumber capital because of French mustard being out there, coming along here. And so Sam knew all these things. The first deer I shot, he butchered the deer for me because he knew how to do that. So he was like Uncle Sam to me as well as to Bobby and John Waite, and just a dear man who I will never forget. And then, of course, there we have my father posing. In front of the red coffee grinder, which we still have, and that's how we ground the coffee. Whoa! Weston Playhouse, of course, had been going since 1936. Our famous Weston Playhouse, the oldest playhouse, country playhouse, summer theater in Vermont, and just about the oldest in the United States. And of course, the new Walker second stage up there that was accomplished with thanks to leadership from Wayne Granquist and a lot of help from a lot of people. Anyway, here's some actors from the Playhouse. The man on the left is John Lilly. The woman on the blonde on the sitting up there is Tony Lilly. They were both actors, and they stayed in Weston, bought a house, and lived there for most of their lives. The other two ladies, the gals, I don't know who they were, but it was a fetching photograph that got more publicity. My grandfather and grandmother, as they got older, lived upstairs over the store in an apartment, so that was handy. My grandfather loved to come down and sit by the pot-bellied stove and talk to the customers and so on, because he'd done that as a storekeeper, because he was always a storekeeper. Problem is, we started getting people coming, but there wasn't any place to eat, so threw in a counter and some stools, and my mother baked hams in the oven and brought over Cobb smoked hams, and they made sandwiches and put a little grill in and served hot dogs and hamburgers, but there were only like 6 seats, and that got too busy, so we built another shack onto the back of the store. We kept building on, building on, building on, and so then it was expanded into the longer lunch counter, and then in 1960 we bought the Bryant House. The Bryant family lived next door, and many of you have probably been to the Bryant House, and that's a full-fledged restaurant that still runs today. And one of my, right after my, I think first year at Middlebury, my father said, "You're going to manage the restaurant this summer." Okay. Well, it was actually pretty fun. The waitresses were great. We had a lot of fun. I had a hell of a hard time trying to figure out how to manage the cooks, because, you know, this kid is trying to manage them. And so we had our moments. The mother of one of my school chums was one of the cooks, and she was kind of fiery, and we'd get into it, and she'd start throwing stuff around the kitchen like all good cooks and chefs do, you know, and so on. So then I just go back and, you know, pay attention to the waitresses, make sure the doors got open and everybody got seated and the food got served, and so on. Here's the grist mill in Weston, which during the 30s got rebuilt and revived by a group that my father belonged to in Weston. And here's my grandfather again, Gardener Lyman Orton, who was the miller at the grist mill. And they ground grain, whole grains, on the stone mill, which was water-powered from the dam that's still there today. And back then, we sold that in the store and through the catalog. And this was the era when modernism was late 40s, early 50s, the world of white bread. Yes, God, white bread. Oh my God, can you imagine? So, of course, the people who made white bread, the big companies and General Mills and all that had this, you know, they didn't like competition. It's just like companies now, you know, it's like Budweiser trying to tamp down every single little brewery that ever tries to go up. So they colluded with our government to pass more stringent laws, like, you know, they thought there was something wrong with having rats where the grain was. It was all right. And so all these little mills, of course, got forced out of business that made stone ground meal. But my grandfather was the miller for a number of years. And by the way, Bobby Waite succeeded him. He taught Bobby Waite how to do it, and he did it as a young man for a while. And there's my grandfather testing out some of the grains in there. Anyway, with all this whole grain business going on, my mother, who we cooked on the wood stove in the kitchen in our house on the village green there, decides she should put together a cookbook. I think my father kind of urged her on to that. So she for a couple years, we ate nothing but samples of things she was making in the wood stove, you know, and we were used to it anyway, because she was a disciple of Adele Davis, who was a very famous, one of the early authors promoting good eating and whole grains and all those things that, you know, finally made a comeback after years and years. But it was lone voices in the woods then, because everything was moving in the opposite direction. So experimented, put together the cookbook. They got it published by Forrest Strauss. And there's a publicity photo of my father and mother at the wood range in the kitchen for the Cooking with Whole Grains cookbook. When you're cooking with whole grains, it's different than just taking white flour and using that, so she worked all that stuff out. One of our, in the early 50s, the catalog on the left there, and the one on the right too has it. You notice up in the left-hand corner there are holes in the catalog? Well, this was something that the Farmer's Almanac used to have a hole. The idea was you put a string through it and hang it in the outhouse, and there it was to read. So the printer drilled holes in the catalog, and it was cool. You know, it was great. People, oh yeah, that's great. And we had a little blurb at the top about why the hole was there, and come about after I got back from Middlebury, I started to look at, we were sending out more and more catalogs, and I was going over with the printer all the costs and, you know, this and that. Well, it turns out, you know, when you're doing a few catalogs and punching the hole costs a cent, so what? But then all of a sudden you start turning a lot of catalogs out, and it was slowing things down because they had to drill holes in the catalog, and the costs got, so we agreed, all right, we got to do away with the hole in the catalog because it's holding things up. And it was even more than the cost. They couldn't get it printed on time. And the catalog on the right was the first time that my dad used the term the voice of the mountains. And he always wanted the catalog, because he'd been a book designer and was in the publishing magazine business and all that. He laid the catalog out, and he wanted people to read it like a magazine. And so, and he felt that it was the voice coming from the mountains on things about Vermont, products from Vermont and other places, of course. And so we used that for years and years and years, the voice of the mountains, and I always liked that name. But after a while it got a little confusing because it's at the Vermont Country Store, et cetera, et cetera. Now here's a photograph, and I'm showing it to you. It's of the store with wagon sled out there with the horses, and I'm in there driving the horses, but you can't tell. But I'm going to point something out. This is the era of Kodak and Kodacolor and Kodachrome. All the professional photographers, as they moved from black and white to color, carried in their car, you know, and they have these station wagons or salesmen's coupes with long, huge trunks, but they carried props with them. And so one of the props they started to carry were red coats and jackets. So you'll notice in there, in the wagon, there's a red jacket. The woman on the street's got a red jacket. You see old photos, you look at Vermont Life, any old photos, look for the red. It's always there. It's always there. Somehow they carry that. So come 1952, who didn't read the Saturday Evening Post in 1952? Nobody didn't read it. Wait, does that sound right? I went to Middlebury and I still can't speak English. Nobody didn't read it. Well, they did a story called The Happy Storekeeper of the Green Mountains. And this was a big deal because it was a full spread. Oh, look, my father's wearing a red jacket in there, and the woman in the bottom right is wearing a red jacket in there. How did that, what a coincidence. They all just wear red around Vermont all the time. And there's the red jacket again. And there's a couple of local guys, and set up a photograph with them. And here's Bobby Wade again, right in the middle. That's Bobby when he was a little kid with Linda Walker and Gloria Parker, a couple of locals who, you know, here they end up in the Saturday Evening Post, had their moment of fame back in those days in front of the candy counter. It was a great shot. Oh, Linda, she's wearing a red jacket. And we sold, you know, things like slates. I called it now, this was, of course, we didn't call it that then, but I call it now the original kitchen iPad. And it's a silent slate because it had felt around the edges, so when it was on the wooden school desk with a wooden slate, it wouldn't make this terrible, it still made a terrible scratching sound, but it wasn't, can you imagine a room full of kids, you know, scratch, scratch, and so on. So we got them from Slatington, Pennsylvania. We sold them in the store, and we also used them to add up the products that people placed on the counter. And so as a kid, you know, I'd 8, 9, 10, 12 years old, adding things up, write them down and add them up. And very quickly I learned the customers would kind of look at it and they go, you know, I could tell, and I go, oh, here, why don't you check it? And I turn it around. I learned that young. Whoa, now they had to add it up. Nobody ever said it was wrong. They go, it looks good. So we did that until our lovely sales tax came in, and then of course we had to get registers that did that. Before we had 1890 registers. We just stuffed the money in the drawer and gave it out, and it somehow, and my mother went around and collected it and wrapped it up in parcels and so on, and put it in the safe under her dresses in the closet in the back of the house. And so, and another funny product we sold, a guy called up and he said, I got a whole warehouse full of these things. They're metal, steel pot scrummers that the Army had used during the Second War, all over the world. Gazillions of them made, and must last forever. And he said, you know, I got them, they're in wooden crates, a gross to a crate. In the world of storekeeping, you get used to dozens, and 12 dozen is a gross, so, you know, all that stuff, that's how we thought and still think. So we sold those for, I don't know how many years, until they were gone. And then that was the end of that. We 15 years ago, tried to get it made again, and we didn't think it could probably sell for $36, so we, so we didn't do it. But, and there's my mom rushing out. She had an office in the house, an office over at the store, 2 young kids who were, you know, God knows in her way, whatever. But she's, again, taking care of all the books, taking care of the money, and all which she learned at Rutland Business College. And I saved all the old typewriters and so on, adding machines that we used over the years, still have those. And this was one of the early adding machines. And so she started to teach me how to do 2 things. First, all these checks were coming in for the mail order, and they had to be endorsed. So there was a rubber stamp and a pad. And so you rubber finger on this hand, stamp, boom. Boom, boom. So I stamped the backs of the checks, and I'm 7, 8 years old. And then she says, now you can add them up. And so 2, 2, 2, and then you pull the crank, see where my hand is. And that was kind of slow. But then Hermes, the great Swiss manufacturing company that made adding machines and fabulous typewriters, came out with this modern affair, which was, of course, electric. And she says, oh, now you can learn how to add checks and not look at the keys. I said, oh, I can? Yeah, I'll show you how to do it. You know, you do this and you look over here. But she thought I would kind of looking, you know, it's hard not to look, you know. So she, she made this cardboard thing that went over like this, like a horse thing. So I was in the, like a horse, and the adding machine's here and the checks are here, and I'm looking at the checks and this cardboard thing, and so it worked. I learned how to do it, and it was great fun. And go back through and check them out. So as time goes along, then we get the idea to build a second store down in Rockingham, and my father had been the chairman of the Historic Sites Commission in Vermont, so had gone around and done a lot of the plaques that we now see, historic sites plaques all over the state. Well, he got that started, and so I was always going with him to these ceremonies for some historic site that they were going to put a plaque up. But this one, there's one in Townsend that got the plaque, and you'll see it on Route 30 as you go down to Brattleboro. But this was another covered bridge that had all to do with the Ball Mountain Dam going to come in. Anyway, this one he bought from the town of Townsend and brought it to Rockingham and reassembled it, and it's still there. Now, I assume everybody in the room, all being Vermonters, knows the tradition in Vermont of the kissing bridge, right? No? Well, in Vermont, a guy has a date with a gal, and if he's fortunate, he's got a car, but bicycles work. And the tradition is, if you drive through a covered bridge, you stop and kiss the girl you're with. And it's all very legit. So, you got a date, where's the bridge? Look, I'm just upholding tradition. We got to do this. So we put the sign up, Vermont Country Store, Kissin' Bridge, and some couple decides to get married in it. This is not staged, and they did. So keep that in mind. So the Rockingham store gets built and opened in 1967. We had a little L there where we had sandwiches, and a few years after that, my dad and I heard about the Cross Baking Company over in New Hampshire going to go out of business. And they were the last people making common crackers in America. There was somebody in Westminster, Mass. that made them, but they'd stopped, and we had been buying them from them. You know, the soda crackers that are like that, and you split them. And Sunday night supper in Vermont consisted of crumbling up common crackers, putting them in a bowl, putting milk on them, throwing on some hunks of cheese, and having some popcorn with that, and that was Sunday night supper. And it's better than it sounds. So he said, yeah, let's get that. Why don't you go to the auction? And they were auctioning on everything. So I went to the auction and bought the oven and bought the old apparatus and all the stuff and the dough twisters and kneaders and that. And fortunately ran into the baker who was out of a job, and Bob Mills, and talked to him and said, let's go, let's do this. You want a job? Yep. And so we moved it all into the little L at Rockingham, started making common crackers. So we saved from extinction the Vermont Common Cracker, which had started in 1842 and was sometimes known as Montpelier crackers, sometimes known as St. Johnsbury crackers. They, depending on the town they happened to be in then. So we got that rescued. Then, of course, we added cookie buttons. The little cookie buttons with only 5 ingredients, and there's not many calories in a cookie button. You can eat 10 of those and it's only 100 calories. I might be lying, it might be more than that, but Cabot, how many, my son Cabot's here, how many calories in 10? 100. There, you see? A family that lies together stays together. And And we put pictures of my sons on there. See that cute little picture? And for each different flavor on the back, we had a different from when they were kids. And so we still make those in all these flavors, but of course maple of course is the traditional Vermont one. And because I'm a dad, and I got to show you some more pictures of my kids. Oh, look at that! Is that the cutest thing you've ever seen? Here's Cabot on the left, Elliot, Gardner. And from the 70s, look at those pants. Are they something? Oh my God, you guys were so cute. The mail order business post-war started, other than Sears Roebuck and Spiegel's and Montgomery Ward, and of course our great friends L.L. Bean and Orvis was around, and a few, but the catalog business was really not, hadn't really been born on a different scale. And after the war in New England, a lot of, we have a Talbot's outlet down here. That was a family business where they had a store. Carol Reed was a family ski shop, and they put a catalog together. We got a catalog together, and dozens and dozens of catalogs started up in New England by mom and pop stores. And the enabler of it was Yankee, because even if you didn't want to start with a catalog, you could put ads in Yankee magazine. And Yankee magazine went to people who lived in New England or who had particularly left New England and were homesick. And it was a gold mine. And people got it, the circulation got up to, I don't know, 600,000 or 700,000. And it went all over the country. And they made a fortune because there were they got up to about 300 pages, and about 250 pages were ads. And so you could advertise, and then there was, how to boil a lobster and all that sort of thing. It was great, And so we all advertised in Yankee magazine. You get names for your mailing list. You could actually make money off the product that you had in there because the costs were pretty reasonable. So Yankee magazine, God bless them, were great enablers of the mail order business, which started to, of course, grow in New England. We got through the 60s. I got in there after I graduated in '63, and then in the 70s, we all remember the gas crisis. We had one, and then it stopped, and then they said no problem, and then it's going to run out again, and we're never going to, whatever all those things were. But the mail order business really started to take off during that, because if you couldn't go anywhere, you ordered stuff by mail. And it really was mail order then. People sent the orders in with a check, and we sent it out to them parcel post. And I started to notice that we could sell a lot of particular products. We could sell enormous numbers of them. Like this stuff, an English product that's called Lodal. In the winter, you get these little cracks in your fingers. We're in the business of solving life's little problems. Not big problems, little problems. But they're annoying. When you have cracks in your fingers in the winter, you can't heal them. This stuff heals them. And it sells like crazy. And it sells because it works. So we started advertising this, and it was selling more and more, and I'm going, wow, one product. Then we got into the selling. We didn't sell wood stoves, but we sell accessories to wood stoves. So we came up with this idea of, it's a little fan about 6 inches square by about 1.5 inches thick, and it was used inside mainframe computers to keep them cool. So it was designed to run 24/7 all the time. And it was quiet. So we started buying those. We set up a little assembly line out in the warehouse, put a cord on them and a plug on the end and a switch. And as you can see in the upper left here, you put it up in your doorway and leave it there. So your stove's in one room, and this pushes the heat. It's not a lot of air at once, but over 24 hours it's pushing a lot of heat out there into the other room, right? Makes sense. And and this thing became our biggest selling product for a while. It's like, holy cow. Now, It wasn't UL approved, but attention to that. What the hell? We didn't even know what UL was. And we went on with this thing, just cranking these things out. And then after, I don't know, 8, 9 years, the guy who was making the fans at some, I don't know, some company in California calls up and he said, "What are you guys doing with those fans?" The Vermont country store? He said, this doesn't sound like you're in the computer business. But he said, you're buying thousands and thousands and thousands of these fans. Well, what the hell are you doing with them? Well, you ever heard of a wood stove? A what? Well, he said, I'll call you back. He said, my lawyers aren't very happy. You can't not sell us this after all this. I mean, you know. So we they kept sending them for a while, and of course, then the whole thing calmed down from the wood stove thing anyway. But once they got wind of that, oh my God, it was like, and they must have been making a lot of money because he said, you're one of our biggest customers for these fans. I said, well, there you go. And so we sold a lot of those, and then these odd products, frownies and rinkies. It's, you know what it is? It's craft tape, like you taped up packages with, cut into special shapes and put in little packages. And because Hollywood actresses would use it at night alone in their bed, I would assume, because you had taped it on your face and so on. And we still sell them. And we were selling like enormous numbers of frownies and rinkies. And so, you know, we knew our customers were older, and they are older, and that's great. I mean, we had more consultants over the years come in and say, you know, you're going to run out of old people. No, we're not going to run out of old people. He said, you got to start selling to the youth. That's where all the action is. Oh, really? I said, are they loyal? No. And so you can't survive by just, and I said, well, you know, everybody gets older and nostalgia kicks in, and we're in the nostalgia business. Reviving products that people remember from years ago, and when you're 20, 30, you don't have nostalgia yet, but it builds up, and then you remember brands that went away and so on, and that's what we're purveyors of. So we're very happy to be the purveyors to, you know, us. Well, I call us the old people, but yes, but older than the, you know, the kids who would go to Abercrombie and Fitch and buy all, you know, the new Abercrombie until one day some teenager in California decides that's no longer cool and pushes some button and the whole thing collapses in 36 hours. So we're going along and business is good. There's my dad and me in the store, but things are getting out of hand up here in Weston because we had bought the houses next to us. We'd filled them up with people. We had bedrooms full of people answering telephones, and we had rented the Walker barn up where the Walker stage is now and stashed products in there and garages all over town, and it was getting a little out of hand, very out of hand. So I said, you know, we got a lot of potential, but we got to do something and I need some help. So I hired Bob Allen, and of course most of you probably know Bob Allen. Bob came to work for me in '81 or '82 in an April morning, and it was drizzling, and I said, Bob, Monday morning, you might as well start. I'll pick you up at 4:30. We're going to go to New York, go to a show. And I said, fine, good. And so out through the mud we go, and down to Rensselaer, and grab the train and go to New York. And one of those trips, pretty soon after, whoop, there we are. We worked all the time. That's why we had a tandem bike, so we could ride the tandem bike around. And we talk about business riding that. And so we had a great time. But it really, Bob did a great job. And together, we decided we had to expand, so we expanded over here to Manchester. And that was 1984 when we opened that, which is a little aerial of that business there. And that had all of the warehousing, administration, catalog production. We do it all in-house. We don't print, of course. But by 1991, we needed a new warehouse. And so we went to North Clarington at the airport near Rutland and built a warehouse up there because we didn't have enough room here. And so back to Bob and me, we'd go to New York, and one day we're in New York, and we jump in the cab, and the guy had this beaded seat thing in the cab. It's, you know, made in China or one of those places over there. But, you know, airflow, you're sitting it all day, and we're talking. She says, never seen one of those, Bob? I've never seen one. And where'd you get this? He said, oh, back at the, you know, where I get my cab every day. They sell them to us. I said, really? Can you show us where they? Said, I can take you there. She did. So it's down in this cellar underneath. Go talk to Janet. She's over there in the corner. And we go find Janet and said, we're interested in these seat pads, wooden. They're wood beads. And she says, yeah, we got them. And Bob says, where'd he get them? That's the $64 question. And she said, you want to see the invoice? Oh yeah, we'd like to see the invoice. Yeah, we'd see it. We'll take a look at it. Said, okay, I'll make you a copy. Perfect. So we got them, went out and bought a couple of VW seats in the junkyard and put them up in the store and put them in the catalog, and they became a big seller. You know, who would have thought? Sometimes these things, you know, you never know what's going to sell. Another guy comes along and said, I got a warehouse full of 1950 Electroluxes. Used. Great. Thanks. What am I going to do with those? He said, but I figured out how to rehab them. So I'm selling them rehabbed. Aha. What woman doesn't remember Electrolux, door-to-door salesman back in the 50s and 60s and so on. And you notice this one's got slides on it because America had gone to wall-to-wall carpeting, right? No more wood floors. I mean, we had wood floors in Vermont, but most of the place wall-to-wall. So rehabbed Electrolux vacuum cleaners for $139.95. Thousands and thousands of these things we sold. And then, of course, he ran out. I mean, we kept begging, can't you find some more? But I think we went through 10, 12 years of those. I don't know how many we sold, but it was enormous, enormous numbers of them. And this whole thing that struck us that, my God, think what you can do if you really get a good product, that you'd never sell any one thing like that in a store so much. So we got the North Clarington thing going. We start cranking up the business. When Bob and I started doing that in Weston in the early 80s, we had, I don't know, 50, 55 people more at Christmas time working for us. And by 2000, or 1998, 2000, we had 500 people working for us. So we had the tiger by the tail, and it was all we could do to kind of keep up with how the hell do we do all this. But kept hiring people, and it worked out well. And so we get to 1996, which is our 50th anniversary, and there's my mom and me. We have a big celebration up in Weston. And I get to ride my the old reproduction 1950s Columbia Cruiser around the village green with all the kids in tow behind me. Because when I was a kid, the old home day in Weston was a great thing in the summer, and us kids decorated our bikes and put, you know, cards on the spokes and made noise and crepe paper and all that stuff and had parades. So I had a blast doing that. We got a hold of Terry Eric, my pal who's deceased now but used to own Hemmings Motor News. Terry, could you get one car for every year from 46 through 96? I could probably do that. And he did. Cars, motorcycles. And so we had, they all came, and we had a car for every year, had a parade, and that was great fun. And my mother was delightful in that. I don't have a picture. Sam Lloyd was emceed. Sam Lloyd was our main guy in Weston, the actor who was there forever and owned the Bow Mill with my uncle, but acted till the end. And so we all treasure Sam, and he was our town moderator for years and years, so he was the ideal fit for that job and did a great job. I don't know what year this was, but it was pretty recently, and there's Martha Stewart and Cabot, Elliott, Gardner, and Cabot in that order in the picture, get on the Martha Stewart show. And, oh, this is going to be great. Well, Martha, of course, starts pitching for goddamn stuff that she's got in front of her called Martha Rap. What? And Gardner's over there, and he's dueling with her because he's got this thing that a friend made and that we sold in the store, another product, bath salts. But the name of the bath salts was Tired Old Ass. And they were really good, but the name was great. And we sold a lot of, okay, it's Father's Day, what are you going to get? Your, what, stocking stuffer for Dad? Tired Old Ass bath soap, there we go. And so Gardner is dueling with Martha, trying to, no, there's a tired old ass here, that Martha Rap. So they're dueling back and forth on the television there. And Gardner did great. He really held his own. But so then Elliot he and his wife Julie have a baby, Leo. And of course, Elliot and I immediately grab Leo and take him down and weigh him on the cheese scale. There's the Fairbanks cheese scale that we used in the store that Sam Waite taught me how to weigh cheese on. So I thought, well, let's get some DNA right into this young fellow and weigh him up on that thing. And so we did, and got a nice photo of that. And then his sister Ella is born. And we now have a product line in our catalog and online and so on of clothing and so on. It's called nightgowns called Ella Simone, because her name is Ella Simone. And so we've Ella's already got her DNA stolen away from her. And there's Gardner with some products. So here we come to today. Back when we were going through all of this growth and trying to figure it all out, and we'd get in consultants, and then and everybody loved to have another strategic planning session. Oh, Jesus. I mean, it's fine once in a while, but I guess. But all these strategic planning things, and SWOT analysis, and who are your competitors? Oh, I don't know, do you suppose L.L. Bean is a competitor, or is Orvis a competitor? And I don't know, what difference did it make? But they always wanted to know that. Well, of course, nobody, knew the competitor to come. We thought it was a river, Amazon, and it didn't exist. So who knew what the real competitor was that we really should have been watching? But there it came, there it is, and it exists. And there's nothing we're going to do about that except what we have to do, which is to find and develop products that Amazon can't sell because they're ours. And otherwise, I mean, we used to sell toasters. Fine, it was really great. We put a toaster in the catalog, sell it for $59.95, and then Amazon would sell it for $39.95, and the customers weren't very happy, obviously. So, because that's the problem with that sort of thing. So we've worked really hard on the team at the country store to develop products that are Vermont Country Store products. Some of them we've had forever, like cola syrup. You got a little tummy problem and so on, and this made right here in Vermont, had that for years, so that's great. It's a Vermont Country Store product. Other products, this is some colloidal soap that's called Silver Savoie, which is, those little problems of life's little problems, God damn it, scratches and itches and so on. And this stuff's good for that. And then we have cream of it. So we bought that brand, and so Amazon couldn't get their hands on it. So we sell it, and we don't sell it to anybody else. We just sell it direct to the customer. Another cool product is Tangy lipstick. Any of you ladies remember Tangy lipstick? Yeah. There were two things in the store that I hear when women come in and see the Tangy lipstick. They pick it up and they'll smell it. By the way, it comes in one color. This is a storekeeper's dream. One SKU. I don't want 30 colors, for Christ's sakes. It's terrible. Your inventory's nuts. It's always the wrong color. Anyway, one color. And a woman puts it on her lips, and the body chemistry, it goes from being orange to being some other color. And it's either the chemistry or the copy I wrote for it, and I called it a mood ring for your lips. So I think mood has something to do with it. Anyway, so women come in the store, and it has a distinct bouquet. It's not a perfume, and women look at that and they go, oh my God, my mother wore that. That was the lipstick my mother wore. And the other comment is, oh, when I was a teenage girl, that was the only lipstick my father would let me wear. Because fathers don't like their teenage daughters running around with bright red lipstick, right? Because they look like whatever. So Tangy was the answer. And so there's a lot of memory around Tangy. And so we now got that. Cabot came up with this strength, the original Strength of the Hills, which is a mixture of herbs and vinegar, of course, and honey. We all know that. And something's going on with it, because it must help, because they keep reordering it. You know, that's the key. Do they reorder it? Anybody remember Country Curtains, the Country Curtains catalog from Stockbridge, Massachusetts? The family, the Fitzpatrick family, they own the inn down there, lovely family and everything, but they sort of ran out of family and selling curtains in a catalog, and so it was had some difficulty. So we were able to pick up the remnants of it and so on, and all of the designs and patterns and all of that. So we're right now in the process of bringing into the catalog and online country curtains at the Vermont Country Store. And this one, of course, shows the classic ball fringe, which they said was one of their best sellers. And we're already selling this, and indeed it must be, because it's selling really well. So this kind of strategy and this kind of execution, it's what continuum of a family-owned business. Because if you're going to keep a family-owned business, you've got a high amount of risk. You got all your money tied up in the business, and so if you don't make any profits, you got a problem. And if you don't have any cash flow, you got a real problem. And we've never had to have a lot of dealings with banks, but some we have. And the banks really love us. They really love us. We don't need any money. But a few years back, the inventory got a little screwed up and so on, and the friendly banker, who we didn't know who the hell it was, is one of these, who the hell are these people? They're not the old Chet Andrews at the Factory Point National Bank who said, don't worry about it, these guys will figure it out. No, they aren't going to figure it out. They want to fine us and charge us and screw us, and suddenly we weren't so, they weren't so happy with us anymore. And but we got through that and said, we got to get so we don't need banks. But so, guess my advice is stay away from the banks. Anyway, so the continuum of the Orton family owning the business is now, of course, with my sons. And Bob Allen and I cut a deal years ago. I said, Bob, you don't want to work here the rest of your life, just most of it. And so Bob, after 25 years, retired, got recruited to go down to the Wyndham Foundation that owns the Grafton Cheese Company, which was in a big financial mess. They'd built a new cheese factory down at the Retreat farm in Brattleboro and could make 8 million pounds of cheese. But they forgot one small detail. Who's going to buy it all? Well, Bob saw that and said, all right. So he got them all fixed up, and now he's over running Green Mountain College because they got themselves all sideways. And so it's pretty cool. Bob's a smart guy and was a math major and all that. He could be an academic, but he's not. And so a non-academic running a college is a good idea. Right now, Jim Hall now has emerged as our president of the Vermont Country Store. So we've had a long history of working with a non-family president of the company, and Jim is a great guy, smart as a whip, and I go over and talk to him, and of course he tells me all about some of these clicks and bits and bytes and stuff that I have no clue what's going on about that. So I got this picture here in front of Mildred's Dairy Bar, named after my mother, and with this was Jim saying to me, "Let me explain that one more time, Lyman." That's kind of how some of the conversations between me and Jim go. So I learn a lot. It's great. There's the Manchester building. You all know that, just up the road. A few years ago, we put on top of that these solar panels, and then on top of the one in North Clarington, solar panels up there, and now we have the largest array of solar panels on rooftop in the state of Vermont, they tell us. And the Rockingham store has expanded, and we've got a Mildred's Dairy Bar there. And the Weston store is, as it is, it can't grow anymore because we are out of space, but there it is from a drone. And then 2 years ago, we celebrated our 70th anniversary, and we did it in conjunction with the Weston Playhouse's 80th anniversary. So we had another parade. And here we are today with Gardner, Elliott, Lyman, and Cabot, the Orton family business, and the continuum goes on. And I'll leave you with our customer bill of rights, something I wrote years ago. The mail order business ate the lunch of the department stores way back in the day when the department stores started to get run by finance people rather than great merchants. And so they kept deleting products, and their service was terrible. And you wanted to return something to Macy's, you had to go to the 5th floor and go back behind the bathrooms and then get a thumbprint and explain why you wanted to return it. So the mail order industry created customer service. And I wrote these things for more, yes, for the customers, but more to say to all of us, this is what we're promising to you, service. And we stand behind all this. Anyway, so that's the long story, and what continues on today. And just let me share one closing thing is that we have town meetings at the Vermont Country Store with all the employees, and call them town meetings because that's, you know, what, of course, Vermont town meetings and so on. And when I was at town meeting a few weeks ago with everybody, the thing that I observe is that this has been hard as hell doing all this. It really took a lot of hard work. And there's been a lot of great people. And there's been people who've been fired, of course. But the pride that the people have of achieving all of this is a strong emotional thing. And there's some of you who work for us who are sitting in the audience who know that and feel that, of feeling like, I never thought we could really do this. I never thought I could achieve that. I mean, I feel that way too. And yet, we got it all done. So I say, you know, at the end of the day, you're going to feel great. It may sound like a funny promise, but it really does make you feel great. So I'm proud, and everybody who makes the country store run is even more proud. So I thank them, and I thank you for coming.